Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to this beautiful afternoon. It's already what? 10:20, so morning still. Today is Wednesday, yes. January 18, 2023. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to this beautiful episode of Goso TV. There's my Goso bell right there. Talking today about how adrenaline fatigue and adrenaline addiction can affect your body, your decisions, your life, really. And I talk from experience on this because I feel like many of us, I've been affected by adrenaline fatigue for basically my whole life because of different life circumstances. And I wonder if maybe there are some of you out there who can relate to this. You don't know why you act and maybe even sabotage your life. And so I hope that I can give some answers and some guidance, kind of the things that I've done and I am trying to do and still doing to mitigate, meaning to bring that down. So I think the first time that I was aware of this problem in my body was when my father-in-law gave me a book called Adrenaline and Stress by, I think it's Armando Hart. No, that's my friend. It is something Hart, Dr. Hart. What's his first name? I forget. But shout out to Armando, by the way. But Dr. Hart wrote a book called Adrenaline and Stress. And that's when I first realized what was happening to my body. And I think my father-in-law could see some of the symptoms in my body, the fast pacing, the talking, not pacing, but the fast talking, the racing mind, the endless pursuit of the next success thing, fear out of fear. And so that began to kind of, I guess, teach me the things that I was feeling in my body and I knew were true. The second time that it happened is it was kind of a rough moment. I had one of my employees basically go to my superiors writing a letter that I was acting out of anxiety, that I'm not sure exactly, what all she said. She actually wrote me the letter herself to me, and the letter didn't say anything. It was nothing terrible, meaning I didn't do anything. The point is that she was concerned about my mental state, basically. And I remember at the time knowing that it was true. And of course, I didn't want to admit it, but I knew that it was true, that I was acting out. Then I remember the first time I had a panic attack when I was maybe in my early 30s. And so then I went on medication, therapy. Maybe it was earlier, my mid 20s, late 20s. And so that began a journey for me of trying to find healing through medication and exercise, fitness, a lot of mindset coaching, a lot of course, faith and prayer and Bible studies. But this is physical. This is not just a spiritual thing. And of course, the spirit meets the body, of course. But this isn't just something that I can pray away. And let me go back to even say, now it's affecting me again. I've noticed it because just a couple of days ago, I went and picked up my beautiful wife, and I was in the car with her, and she said, "Wow, you're really amped up." And to me, I was just being normal, but I could tell that my mind was in this state of adrenaline fatigue, adrenaline overload. And I've learned a lot about what that means in terms of the actual brain chemistry and all that. And as I said, it's a spiritual thing. Yes, it is ultimately about trusting God. All of it is. But when you're starting with, as MLK would say, without a shoe or without shoes, and you're asked to run, then you have to figure out how to get some shoes on you first. And so for me, it all started with moving away from home when I was a young boy, and the shock and trauma, the PTSD of a war that I went through, and seeing the panic of my country being torn to pieces. My family didn't panic, even though maybe they should have, but it was definitely a very horrible time. Imagine Ukraine, but imagine Ukraine happening in your own backyard. That's basically what I went through. And so that was traumatic. But really, I would say the real trauma was being away from home without my mom and dad from age 11 till I was an adult, 11 or 12. And so I went through all of my teenage, preteen, 11, 12-year-old stuff without my parents. I had my grandma, so she was everything to me, my rock. But of course, a mom and dad is everything to you. And so I went through all of my teenage stuff without my parents. I remember school and church always being my saving grace. And so that really helped me to stay sane, because not only that, but then I was an immigrant. I didn't have any long-term citizenship. It was all just permits and 3 months and 6 months. And finally, all that expired. And then I went into this panic mode about being deported. And I actually was deported. And that was maybe the height of my adrenaline, just shock, what was shocking my system. On top of that, my grandma, who obviously was older, she had high blood pressure. And so I remember she would sometimes bleed at night. And I remember always being aware of her every move. Is she alive? Is she breathing? Is she in the bathroom? Is she okay? Because my whole life depended on her life, on her livelihood, on her being healthy. And so I lived with this constant fear of her not being well. And because that would mean me going back to this country where there was a war and I could die, and I didn't want to leave. I loved my life here in the States. I knew God had a plan for my life. So those were the traumas. And even maybe going back to when I was a young little baby, my mom would tell me that my grandma took me away from her in some ways to raise me herself. This is back home in Nicaragua, because my mom was so young. And so even that, I think she would tell me that she wasn't allowed to nurture me or hug me or hold me. And so even some of that, I think, gets in there as far as the need for safety. Plus my whole temperament and personality. So the last few years, I would say, certainly my last church, I went through a very traumatic experience, a lot of negativity and just horrible outcomes. But maybe some of that was also part of my own, as I said, my own process of being calm, not being calm, having times where I didn't quite understand what was driving my need for success or my drive to do more. And as an Enneagram 3, so now you throw personality in there, being a high achiever and someone who's looking for more can seem awesome, but really it's not very healthy. I was just doing actually a survey earlier today, and it talked about personality and are you a visionary? And I'm like, yes. And I'm like, wait a minute, am I really any of those things? Or is that just my alter ego, my anxiety, my adrenaline talking? Now, adrenaline, you need adrenaline. Adrenaline's not bad. You need adrenaline to survive and to accomplish great things. And a lot of us who are artists and creatives, entrepreneurial types, leaders, we need that. But when it's motivated or driven by trauma, then it can't be good. It can be bad. Now, you bring that to today and this season where I am changing my life from a traditional 9-to-5 corporate, quote unquote, corporate world to this mosaic life. My adrenaline levels have been through the roof. I mean, one of my friends, our podcast that I follow, she talks about a saliva test for cortisol. And I can imagine if someone was to test my cortisol levels, they would be through the roof. And so, and physically, of course, I haven't been exercising. It's been years. So all of these things have definitely had an effect on my adrenaline levels and cortisol levels. So medication helps, exercise helps. Of course, the pandemic was another horrible thing that ruined so many of us that already deal with adrenaline and with stress and with anxiety. That raised my levels, like I'm sure for many of us, to crazy levels. And so now I'm just beginning to come off of that. So I don't drink a lot of coffee. I drink a lot of water. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't do any of those things. I have a wonderful marriage and family, and I have an amazing church. All these things bring me a lot of peace. But there are times when I sabotage the very things that I love because those cortisol levels are so off, just through the roof. And I even have a couple of things right now, projects that I know are good for me, and yet I'm, because of my adrenaline levels being so high, I am pushing against them versus actually letting them into my life. And it's all motivated out of, as I said, fear and worry. And my wife tells me that there's no reason for me to worry, and yet I have this childhood blah blah stuff, even though I've been through therapy and biblical deliverance and been through so much, where I respond so harshly sometimes. Not harshly like mean, but just so, maybe I react is maybe a better way to put it. I react so so much that it isn't even me. It is no, that's not what I mean. It's too much. It is. I'm not able to think rationally about things, or I do, but I let. Anyway, I think you know what I'm saying. So right now, what I'm doing is I'm trying to say, okay, wait a minute, that's not true. Is this true? I work on this stuff every day, day and night. Medication helps, working out, I'm sure that would help if I was doing it. Love and peace, and as I said, God and church and serving Jesus, all those things help my family. I mean, I am surrounded by love. But as Dr., I forget his name, wrote another book called The Body Keeps a Score, the body and your emotions, there is no amount of prayer or Bible study or whatever that can eliminate. I think I will go to the grave with these, and many of us will, with these tendencies because of the amount of stuff we've been through. Thankfully, I haven't ruined my life with drugs, alcohol, or any sort of violence or marriage or any of that kind of stuff. But definitely it's affected me often, maybe at least 2-3 times in my life when I have not been able to cope, I guess would be one way to put it, with the amount of adrenaline that is running through my system. So yeah, medication helps. Of course, not having a lot of coffee, just a cup in the morning, water, exercise, prayer, love, support, medication, coaching, Bible study, all those things help. I think what really mostly helps is, I've always said, is the new Me Too movement, is to say, you know what, me too. I also deal with that. And that's why I'm always so open with you, the audience, to build, in these topics, to build community. Because I know I'm not alone. I know, I mean, there are books written on this. There are podcasts. There are all kinds of stuff where this shows up. Digestive issues, hormonal issues, headaches and migraines. And I remember my jaw was killing me just about 3 months ago. I couldn't even open my jaw from what's that called? TMI, right? Not TMI, but TMJ, something like that. And so you have all of these physical symptoms that show up, maybe high blood pressure for some people, diabetes, who knows, addictions, of course, and violence and domestic violence and laziness and apathy and procrastinating on things, and you can't keep a job, and so now you're broke, and so the cycle continues. And so that is something that I am realizing about myself. And I have a friend who, she's a good friend of mine, and we talk a lot about similar things because we've been through similar stuff. And she recommends to me, which I think I need to consider, to shut things down as far as all of this adrenaline stuff, like this pursuit of this and that and doing this and doing that. And I don't think that I can shut down things that I love, but I think the idea of, my wife tells me the same thing, of pursuing more is the problem. I was listening to David Ortiz. Is that David Ortiz? Is that his name? Let me see here. Nate Ortiz. And he has a podcast about these topics of adrenaline and all these things. And he grew up different but similar. You know, he had he was a heroin baby. His parents got divorced. My parents my dad's in heaven now, but we're married the whole life. So, but my trauma was different. It was separation and war, as I said. Trauma is trauma. And he tells a story how he would know in his body when he was afraid. And he would, I think there was some kids that wanted to beat him up. And so he would go around that street, and even though it would take them an hour to get home, an hour longer. And so all this stuff are stories. I never went through that, but I mean, I can tell, I know in my body how many times I've done the same thing, avoided certain things to try to protect myself. Whereas maybe I need to go through that block and beat those kids up and confront my issues or my fears, not my issues, but confront the world. And so, and I think that a lot of times, and I have done that. I remember one time when I was in the middle of one of these seasons, I remember I thought I had heart problems. And I'm a healthy man. My heart is strong. But I remember checking myself into an ER or whatever, urgent care, to get an EKG because I thought there was something wrong with my heart. And they tested my heart and they're like, "You're a healthy man. You're as strong as a bull." But the point wasn't the fact that I thought that I had a problem, which is part of the anxiety and all this stuff, but the strength that it took, and these are the victories, to drive myself to this place. And I was in Colorado in this urgent care. I think it was on a Saturday morning. It was like an hour and a half away. And I remember thinking, what if they find something? What if they're going to just check me in and they're going to be doing open heart surgery? I mean, catastrophizing to the nth degree. My adrenaline addiction was through the roof. By the way, I misspelled addiction, so let me fix that. There it goes, right? I think that's correct. No, still extra I there. There we go. Addiction. Okay. So there are many victories that we need to celebrate. It's not about feeling sorry or about, oh no, woe is me. It's about, no, working through it, but being aware. Another victory, let me go through some of the victories, is when I did a conference at my previous church called Finding Grace Through Anxiety Conference, the Finding Grace Through Anxiety Conference. I brought my therapist, my doctor, my nurse. It was like David Letterman, if you remember it, when he had all his people on his show. And I had musicians, and my mom was there, and we had a taco lady and balloons, and we sang to Pharrell's Happy. I mean, it was an amazing, 100 people showed up, a free conference. We didn't do it in Spanish, which I should have done. But anyway, amazing, amazing, amazing. But there have been times where I have overcome, and I overcome daily, but I definitely know that I would be maybe even further ahead in everything in areas of my life if I had, let me not say that because that's not true. I'm very happy and proud of where I am. But yeah, there are definitely things, my master's degrees, my fitness, maybe more financial success, maybe, I don't know, things that maybe I could have done better if I had been maybe more in control of myself. And here's the thing, I guess, to really state this properly or rightly, I have been, I would say 80% of the time, in control of myself with God's help and all these tools. And I would say maybe 10, 20% of the time, and I think I'm going through one of those seasons right now where I feel like, okay, wait a minute, something's off. This is not normal. I shouldn't be saying or responding or feeling these things. And especially when my wife, of course, as I said, in the car, she's in the car with me and saying, I think there's something wrong. And so that wakes me up always when your wife, the woman you love and dream of, says, this is not right, this is not good. So that really helped me to kind of go back to these themes. And then I have another, as I said, a project that I really, really love. And I could be blowing it up, and I really don't want to blow it up. I need to be self-aware of what's driving my fear, my trauma, basically, my adrenaline fatigue and addiction, and why I am in this mode that comes from all these things that I've mentioned, and then what to do to change. And so I'm in the middle of making some changes and some habit and some changes to my habits to collaborate more. One of the things that heals me the most, and maybe this is a tip for you as well, is to be less of a lone wolf. And I have changed so much. I am such a collaborative person now. I'm not seeking the spotlight. I'm not looking to be the famous musician or the famous preacher, which is part of what my adrenaline would do. a few years ago, even. I don't know, whatever, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But now I have matured so much to now support up and coming stars and thought leaders and creatives, which really is my best place to be. I love being here, sharing with you and being on a stage and preaching and teaching and singing. Yeah. But I would say that when I'm at my best is when I am doing some of that, yes, but I'm also behind the scenes supporting. Now, what are the triggers? Well, money and health. Why? My grandma, right? And so as I grew up with a grandma who I thought was not physically healthy, meaning her health, then whenever things happen that is anything dealing with health, let's say this pandemic, right? Then it triggers me. Same with money, same thing, right? When I was a young kid, I thought, okay, if I'm going to be sent back, I'm going to be deported. I was afraid of everything dealing with, not being able to work, not being able to provide for myself, for my grandma and I, until later in life. So the whole thing of being deported, the whole thing of losing my life, meaning the life in the States and having to go back home, being without my parents. So all of that, anything that deals with money, I always joke with my family and friends that when I was growing up, when you grow up with very little, and it really wasn't that, really, even though we grew up with, quote, little, it never bothered me, nor was it, I was never hungry. My grandma cleaned 3 homes every day to feed me. And so shout out to my grandma in heaven. That's why I had her. She lived with us till the very last moment and minute of her life. But I was never afraid of not eating, so I'm not talking about that. It was more of a fear of not having enough, of safety. It was really more the immigration thing. I was always afraid of having cops come in through the door and take me and send me back home. And so that provided a lot of lack of safety, a lack of security. And so to this day, whenever I feel like someone is taking something from me, it just triggers me. It's like, wait a minute, you're taking from me. You're going to steal from me. My safety is going to be gone. And so I remember I always tell this story that I would go into the cupboards. I don't even know if this is true or not, but it sounds good now. Into the cupboards when I was a young kid with my grandma, a young boy, and look to see how many Cheerio boxes we had. And there was only one, I would panic. It could be full, it could be brand new, it could be maybe there was like 3 behind it I couldn't see. I wanted to see 3, 5, 10 boxes of Cheerios. And it makes sense, right? Why I had these instincts, adrenaline addictions. It's because of that fear. And so now, fast forward to being an adult, I've made $100,000 and I've made $0. I've made $50,000 and I've made $10,000. I've made lots of money and no money. And I've always responded to finances and to money with the same attitude of fear. If I have a lot, then it's the fear of it's going to be taken away. And if I have nothing, it's the fear of we're going to be homeless and out on the streets. And so then everything that comes through my life into my mind, I evaluate it as, is this taking from me or not? Now, I'm a very generous man. When we had lots of money and we both, Rochelle and I, were making a lot of money, we gave 20, 30% of our income away. And now that we have less, we continue to give. But of course, you have less to give because you're making less. Now, a rational person, me, knows that God is able to provide and he is going to provide. And he's already providing. I'm going to start teaching here soon and blah, blah, blah. There are these things that I have that I think are looking positive and hopeful. But as I said, my gut reaction, my involuntary reaction, my adrenaline addiction or adrenaline levels, when they get to be so super high, then I can react very almost like impractically or very irrational thoughts, mostly that come from some of the stuff I've mentioned that tell me you're in danger, you're going to lose it all, there's no way out, you're going to be deported, you don't have enough Cheerio boxes, something's wrong. Now, is being unemployed good? No, of course it's not. Is having, let's say, a studio and you don't make any money off of it, is that good? Of course it's not. Is spending money on something that is not bringing you any money, is that good? A good business practice? Of course it's not. So I'm not saying that there aren't real things that I'm actually feeling and going through. But the point is, I have to keep reminding myself of the truth of, wait a minute, there's hope here. This is where God has me. This is what God is doing. We are okay. This is really what God wants. And so versus taking matters into my own hands, which I've done many times, and then I crash and burn, or the thing, whatever, it doesn't work. So what I'm doing to mitigate that is, as I said, medication, working out, sort of, not really, conversation, the Me Too movement, the new Me Too movement, basically saying, hey, if you are like me, then you're in good hands. Let's grow together. I understand you. Listening to podcasts, a lot of biblical deliverance, coaching, just really confession, just being honest. And not just being honest with, quote, the adrenaline addiction, but also with the reality of life. Some of these things are stressful. Being unemployed, my beautiful father-in-law, being on his deathbed, my mother-in-law passing away, the pandemic, these are real things. So I'm not saying that things don't happen, or that I should or you should just sort of trust God in some angelic way and not let life hit you. Of course, life hurts. Of course, things happen. Of course. But it's also about understanding and making wise decisions. And I was, for example, listening to this podcast on music, on the music business, and they're saying that if you don't have a financial plan for your music business, then you're just throwing things away. You're throwing everything away. And that's what I am trying to do. I don't want to throw away what God's given me. I want to be a profitable, a wise, a business-wise music ministry, where I'm not just spending thousands of dollars every month or hours every month and nothing is coming in. That's not normal. That is maybe the opposite. That's more codependency. That is letting people walk all over you. You can't do that either. You have to have wisdom, wise as serpents, Jesus said, and gentle as a dove. And so there's a balance there. But at the same time, it's good to be aware. It's good to, when my wife tells me that you're hyped up right now, then I need to listen to that. And that's what I've been doing. So I hope that helps, and that you can join me in this journey to understand more. Some of the books that I've read, I coach on these topics, not because I'm some superhero, but because I understand the journey. And I coach people, young and old, people my age or younger, that are in the same boat. $75 a session, twice a week for 6 months, 9 months, 3 months. We can do it whatever you want. Once a week also, I recommend that, but I recommend more twice a week. But this is what I do. I coach people through these topics, talking about personality and trauma and some of the things that I've mentioned, the books and the tools and all these things, so that we can support each other. And that's what my coaching program does, is try to support each other. $75 a session, twice a week, and we can do it for 6 months or maybe once a week. And if you are someone in need, we have a scholarship available. It's only $25 per session, so that you can join the program. But thanks so much for being here. I hope that this helps.